For those of you who haven't met, my name is Michael Madoff. I recently joined Filecoin Foundation as the head of governance. And before stepping into this role, my journey cut across technology and strategy. My studies were in political science. But before joining the foundation, I was helping pioneer liquid democracy and launch on-chain governance in the Cardano ecosystem. And before that, I was a Boston Consulting Group strategist.
Hey everyone, I'm Tanisha. I am a consultant at Filecoin Foundation, helping with governance initiatives. I also work on governance with a bunch of other ecosystems like Avail, Mina Foundation, and helping out there.
All right, so to me, the promise of blockchain is not necessarily financial or even technological, but political. And what do I mean by that? If you're in a village of 100 people where everyone knows and trusts one another, then governance is fairly straightforward through soft consensus. But as a society gets larger and more complex, there's a trade-off between scale and trust that needs to be addressed by increasingly cumbersome governance systems. But for the first time, we have the technology to break that trade-off at scale through the blockchain. And what drew me to Filecoin in particular is the urgency of its mission, preserving humanity's data. And as has been said a few times today, as technologies like AI are disrupting our society, the importance of data sovereignty and authenticity through decentralized storage is going to become a vital concern. So I'm a new contributor to the Filecoin ecosystem, and over my first months, I've been prioritizing listening and learning as much as I can from all of you. What's working, what's not, what needs to change, and the results offer lessons for what the Foundation governance team is shaping into concrete phased reforms. And so, quick show of hands, how many of you were able to catch our talk at FDS Virtual? Okay, about half the room. So I'm just going to give kind of an executive summary overview of what we talked about there for context here. So let me introduce the Constellation Program. This is our strategic framework for evolving Filecoin's governance. Constellation is a deliberate, phased, and modular approach to improving how decisions are made and how ecosystem resources are allocated for maximum impact. First, why the name Constellation? Because each organization within the ecosystem, each contributor, each participant is like a star, distinct, valuable, and interconnected. And each one matters on its own, but together they form a pattern and a structure that can be used to navigate forward. So instead of a sweeping overhaul, the Constellation program is really about progressing in clear stages. Each module is piloted, tested under real conditions, and refined before it is scaled up across the network. And so this is where we started over the last several months. We've been methodical. We kicked off a discovery phase, doing a current state assessment, understanding where the ecosystem is at. We did a benchmarking exercise looking at many other ecosystems, how they're doing governance, how they're solving the problems that we're currently facing. And today, we'd like to talk you through the resulting operating model and implementation plan related to that assessment. And so just to briefly recap, we had done a number of interviews with different stakeholders across the ecosystem, FIP editors, implementers, storage providers, and core devs, and tried to listen to what are the big pain points. And so first, for FIP editors, it was really about having to make high-stakes decisions without clarity around what their role and responsibility for those decisions looks like. From implementers, a lack of prioritization and sometimes a lack of credit they felt for the work of doing the implementation. Core devs had experienced limited time and resources and a lack of clarity around the FIP lifecycle. And then finally for storage providers, it was a low trust in the governance process as a whole and the perception that they're not included in that process as much as they would like to be. And so then we talked about the what governance, and I call this the governance pillars of what needs to be governed coming up, and that breaks into 3 different areas: economic, operational, and protocol. And so within each of these areas, economic is really focused on things like grants, rewards, the use of the mining reserve and treasuries, and everything that has to do with the economics of blockchain. From an operational perspective, it is really about processes like the FIT process and other interconnected, figuring out what roles and responsibilities among different members of the ecosystem are. And then at the protocol level, it's really those on-chain technical elements about decision-making. Are we going to do some form of on-chain voting? What are the rules around network upgrades? And so all of these things need to be resilient to make the building as a whole stand up. And underlying that, there's, of course, meta-governance, which is the rules about how rules are made, institutions, tools, and processes. And then the last thing we talked about at Virtual is what are the building blocks for decision-making and voting methodology. And we break that into 4 areas that we're going to go over in detail in a workshop tomorrow. But just to brief you now, the question is, who votes and who gets a seat at the table in decision-making? What are the options that those decision makers have to choose from? How is voting power distributed amongst those decision makers? And then how is final consensus determined through aggregation rules? Yeah, so now let's talk about the phasing. So like I mentioned, the Constellation program is broken down into phases, each with a specific focus area. And the reason we're doing this is adopting a phase strategy ensures that we can keep the system flexible, minimize risk, and deliver solutions the community can trust. By modularizing our reforms, we create a process where each new mechanism, from incentive alignment to new voting models to how we scope and fund public goods, is independently testable, improvable, and replaceable. And this helps us avoid the downsides of an all-or-nothing approach to implementing governance. And so what we've done is broken this roadmap into 3 phases, and thanks to the foundation design team for this NASA punk aesthetic, we're calling it. And so phase 1 is called Nebula, and this is where stars are born. This phase represents the creative explosion of ideas, stakeholders, and hypotheses. It's where foundational questions are asked. What do we value? Who decides? How should we organize? It's time for exploration, experimentation, and divergent thinking. And then the middle nexus phase, clarity begins to emerge. Actors align around shared principles, governance structures take shape. This is the time for coordination without centralization, fostering mutual trust, defining norms, and testing system boundaries. And then finally, the galaxy phase marks the realization of a mature ecosystem. And this looks like a resilient and self-sustaining system where roles are formalized, protocols are embedded, and when new contributors are entering, it's very clear what the rule set is. Governance becomes evolutionary and capable of adapting itself. And now, what does that look like in detail across the governance pillars? So now, harkening back to the pillars of what is being governed, what does that look like in terms of its evolution over time as we experiment, scale, and institutionalize? And so in Nebula right now, we are launching incentive models, calibrating value flows, standing up core governance infrastructure, and implementing processes, norms, and shared accountability, and really focusing on that initial design piece. In phase 2, we're scaling those incentives, institutionalizing sustainable funding mechanisms, scaling distributed governance operations, and then embedding governance mechanisms on-chain to enable programmable rules-based coordination. And then finally in phase 3, when the system is mature and ready, we are governing things like grants, a treasury, and incentives through ongoing protocol integrated mechanisms, formalizing roles and decision rights, and orchestrating rules and upgrades through self-executing protocol mechanisms. And just to zoom in a little bit on phase one and what a potential initiative roadmap could look like, wanted to take you through this example. And so again, agreeing on kind of the strategic direction of the three pillars, what are all of the steps quarter to quarter that get us there. We have a presentation from Tom, like I mentioned, coming up on this governance token concept. And so here we are today going to present that, doing a design and then a pilot launch targeting in Q2. On economic incentives, we're going to talk about the Phil Plus program that the Fiddle team has done a little workarounds, allocator KPI design, rolling that out. We have a few different teams that are working on experimental allocator concepts. And so some of those are going to be announced here and then developed and rolled out, and eventually the idea to scale up the experimental models that do work. In operations, we have, of course, an ongoing exercise at the Filecoin Foundation about facilitation. There's a public governance working group that meets every week, which I invite all of you to join. But things like core devs, implementers, the FIP 100 committee, all of that ongoing activity to keep governance flowing. The FIP process that Tanisha just talked about, we've now talked about the concepts that we want to workshop with you tomorrow. And then in Q1, arrive at a design of the voting and then figure out what are the emergency procedures behind that. On the automation side, we are excited to be partnering with the team from Cha-Ching, who are doing some great work around archiving of the FIP process and all of our governance data, which is surprisingly not currently stored on Filecoin, but definitely should be. And using that data to also create an incentive model for participation among governance stakeholders that we're excited about. And then finally, the time lock design that Tanisha already went into. And then at the protocol level, how do we build that bicameral decision-making system? And gradually over time, like we know that token holders are not necessarily ready to be voting and making decisions, but how do we start building up that capability and that class of experts in a way that is gradual, has a lot of safeguards around it, but is leading to a place where the community feels it has direct input. And so design and charter for that stewards upper house group, setting up their multi-sig, selecting and onboarding who would be the potential members of that group. And then in terms of on-chain voting, figuring out quorums and thresholds. And then in terms of protocol parameters, understanding what are the parameters that need to be defined and potentially opened up to being governed. And then underlying that, of course, is infrastructure. The Uxit team has already started on a redesign for the voting app to match up with the vote escrow concept that we hope to develop and roll out over the course of Q2. Also want to build a governance dashboard to track metrics, and then communications across all of that. And so finally, what separates this being kind of a theoretical exercise to actually how do we measure the success of the program? And we want to, again, workshop with all of you, what are those metrics that need to be defined? And so we have here kind of an opening look at those metrics across all the different categories. There's foundational metrics like community confidence in the governance system as a whole and start collecting survey data about what that looks like. And I won't go through all of them in the interest of time, but yeah, looking at what are the foundational metrics that are across the whole governance system that we want to measure? What are economic indicators that show the success of that pillar? And I think our first priority is stabilizing the Filecoin economy and figuring out all the funding mechanisms associated with that. On an operational level, There are lots of items from our ongoing activities that can be tracked and quantified. And then finally, at the protocol level, tracking what that on-chain implementation looks like. And so the idea before moving on to a new phase is to make sure we've reached a certain threshold of success in the metrics that we're tracking for a previous phase. And so you'll see color-coded here, what do we think is relevant for phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. And all of that can roll into, this is a mock-up of a governance dashboard so that we can see across all of those metrics, how are we performing day to day and quarter to quarter, and then are we ready as a community to progress the next stage because we're happy with the metrics that we have. So yeah, in closing, thank you all so much for joining. Like I mentioned, we have a workshop tomorrow where we're going to zoom in on some of the particular details of this and work through what the implementation is going to look like, get your feedback, and understand really where we want to go with the future of Filecoin governance. So thank you all for tuning in.